been talking about it, although I did just have one person on the chat said they used it for a couple of years, which is a complete anomaly. And there's a good reason that you probably haven't heard about it. So shortly after it was released, this was considered one of the biggest flops in just the history of Microsoft, and that is a very high bar. If you are in the same breath as the Zune or as Bob, that's not a good sign, right? There's a million lists you can look at online that will tell you that it's one of the top failures. So I just grabbed one. But at Xbox, at Microsoft, and I'm guessing in the games user research industry too, we're embracing this idea of learning from failure. And so we always hear about, oh, we should be learning from failure. So I like to go out of my way to talk about some of the failures and what we can learn from it. In this particular case, I find myself, talking about this project the most, even more than some of the successful games I've worked on. On the right is a picture of my window ledge, which has 2 of the Zune phones on there, just to remind me how much I learned from that experience. And it was a great experience and I loved it, but really, the learnings, and I kind of show them to people as I'm telling the stories. And I guess the question would be, well, why talk about it at a games conference? John mentioned earlier that I was a trader. I mean, I've bounced around different parts of Microsoft and beyond, working on platforms and hardware and software and things that are not games. When I look back at those couple of years working in mobile, back in 2007 through 2009, there's a lot of challenges we face, and there's a lot of similarities to what's going on in the game industry today. And I think there's at least a few things that we can learn and that I could share with you, this audience. And if you know me personally, then one of my passions is really talking about platforms and hardware and software and trying to bring that into the games industry. So this is a fun topic for me. So just to give you a little bit of context, we're going back into a time machine into around 2007. It shipped in 2010, but 2007 is when myself and Kimberly Pierce joined the team. The project called Project Pink had already been going for a couple years, but Kim and I were really the 2 user researchers on that project. Fergie was at the top of the charts. One of the top grossing, or the only Marvel movie in the top grossing movies, was actually a Sony Spider-Man movie. So you know how long ago that was. And even more relevant, this is really when the history of the iPhone started. So I had to go back and look this up, but it was the iPhone 1 was 2007. So imagine going back and working in mobile right as the iPhone was being released. So we're going to talk about 3 lessons. Hopefully it'll be interesting. You're going to find out what rabbits and paper airplanes and Paris Hilton have in common. So we're just going to jump in with the first lesson. So there is an old proverb that a friend told me years ago that goes, those who chase 2 rabbits catch none, right? If you're going in 2 different directions, if you're trying to grab 2 different things, it's going to be hard to even get one of them. So if we go back to 2007, our rabbits were this large group of feature phone users. You can think about them as flip phones, and then smartphone users. So Kin was really designed to be in the middle. So you've got cheap feature phones that are really good at texting. They're really good at calls, don't require a data plan, kind of simple hardware. And then smartphones are really on the rise. The iPhone 1, but this was the time of BlackBerry. This was the time of Palm. If you can believe it, it was also the time of Windows phones. We had, thousands and millions of units for Windows Phone 2, kind of like around the Windows Phone 6 timeframe. And so the Kin team had a really great idea. It was, hey, let's get something right in the middle. There are cheap phones with low amount of features. There are these more complicated, expensive, techie, dare I say, kind of nerdy phones at the time with lots of buttons. So let's get something in between. Let's aim for a younger audience that may have a little more money but can't afford the higher end phones. They want more features, especially through sharing and social networking, but they don't need Exchange and Outlook and all kinds of other stuff. So we're going to go something for right in the middle. And this sounded great. And, certainly Kim and myself were all in on this idea. But then we launched. And what we found was that, yes, we had built a piece of hardware that was a little more expensive than feature phones, but not that much, definitely cheaper, had some more features, had some social networking integration. But what we didn't factor in enough was that our phone also required a data plan. So at the time, anything around social networking or any type of phone that you were going to build that even was remotely smart would need a data plan. And really back then, there turned out to be this big divide. Either you get a data plan or you don't. So I just grabbed a random tidbit of a review from around then that's talking about how, yes, we were missing some basic features, of course, but we were also had to have a data plan. when we talked to the folks at the retail stores, it turned out that we were getting lumped in with the smartphones. So even though we were aiming for the middle, we were getting lumped in with that right side, with the smartphone side. The Verizon reps, we heard their feedback, plus we went to the stores and heard them saying like, oh, that phone's fine, but if you're gonna get a data plan, go get one of these phones, go get a new Android phone, go get an iPhone. And that's what people did. This was not the only reason, of course, which we're going to talk about, but this idea of this barrier between if I want a feature phone, great. If I want a smartphone, um, I have to afford a data plan. That really sunk us when we hit retail. So tying into games, I'm not going to name names on these slides. It's not really productive. I'm not going to throw up a bunch of games that I think were failures or anything like that. So I'm just going to keep it kind of generic. But in this case, if you're working on a game title right now, someone has probably come by and said, okay, we need battle royale and we need auto chess. That's like a new thing. And then of course it has to be open world because everything is open world, right? What are the odds that trying to take, battle chess and battle royale and open world are going to make a fantastic experience? Now, certainly as you bring parts of different genres together, you do get beautiful experiences, amazing games. You could probably light up the chat right now with examples. But in a lot of cases, if you're just trying to go for these different audiences or chasing these rabbits or chasing these genres, and you're grabbing pieces of them, you're never really going to deliver on the promise of why gamers love those things in the first place. I don't know how you could kind of do battle royale, auto chess, open world, but there are a lot of examples of trying to do that and not quite hitting. So I would say in this case, the lesson learned is really think about what you want to be, really understand where those barriers and their divides are as you're building your games, so that you don't land in a middle sort of blank space. So lesson 2, usable is not useful. This seems kind of obvious if you're working in the games industry and you can think, well, usable is not fun. I mean, we know that. Xbox Research knows that more than anything. We've got our playtest labs out in Redmond that we've had for years. So this is not particularly unique. But this idea of usable and useful is extremely important in mobile or any kind of a platform space. So as I mentioned, it was me and Kim. There were just two of us working on a brand new phone from the ground up, which meant new hardware, new operating system. It was kind of an offshoot of Windows Phone 7, but really was very different. All the apps, email, the phone app, browser, and again, back in 2007 when none of this stuff was standard. We even had a cloud presence, which to be honest really was ahead of its time. We called it the studio, and you can see, just for fun, I put like an old red line comp sheet there with next to the picture of what one of our ad looks like. So that was fantastic. So as user research, we're trying to cover this wide space. I was really focused on the UX, and Kim was really focused on audience understanding, which was fantastic. But it meant that I was running around trying to do tons of usability. One day it was I would have a model of a keyboard and try to understand if people could reach the shift and the alt keys. Another day would be, oh, here we have a flash prototype of our website that we're going to build. So there's just tons and tons of that. And very often when I was focusing on usability, weren't really focusing on the usefulness factor. So it's not to say that we weren't doing deep customer understanding. Like I said, Kim was out doing that. We had marketing, we had planning, who were fantastic. We're building a couple of personas, which I have here. So we really were understanding what our customers wanted. We were focusing on younger, we were focusing on that smartphone market. Excuse me. But the thing that was really difficult was that we were doing the audience understanding, kind of the front edge work. We were doing the usability work, but we weren't really pairing those to useful, and we certainly weren't connecting them to the engineering process, right? The game development, or sorry, the product development process. So now when I think about it, there are these wonderful frameworks that are out that people are using, and they've been out for years. So Jobs to be done is a great one. OKRs are kind of sweeping Microsoft at the moment. Not quite Xbox yet, but definitely Microsoft. It's objectives and key results. And then experience outcomes. That's something we did have even at Microsoft back then by Steve Herbst and Mike Medlock and a few other folks. But these are frameworks where really upfront you define what the user needs are and what the goals, like the jobs to be done. I mean, why is this customer hiring your product, your piece of technology, your feature? What job should it be doing for them? And the beauty there is not that it gives you a set of jobs, it's that you can then, you map them out front, and then you use them throughout the engineering process. So you have a milestone, or you say, oh, we're going to cut this feature. Well, which one of the jobs does it cut? Or we're going to change the feature so it doesn't do this thing anymore. Is that still going to be adequate? Is it going to get the job done? I've worked on other projects where we've done this kind of model, and it's really helped us, on a monthly or quarterly basis as we're going through, to keep everybody marching in the same way. So for game examples, I mean, for me, this is absolutely all of them. I think on the one hand, if you're in the games industry right now, and even if you're working solely on a game, you probably have these experiences that are game experiences related to it. So you've got a store, you've got a launcher, you've got a phone app, you've got a forum, you have a Reddit thread or something you're trying to understand the user experience of. That is a very easy place to grab one of those frameworks, or just to in general talk about useful, right? Like, sure, an app is cool, but what job is it doing for people? So I think that's kind of obvious how you can tie useful into that, into kind of the platform side of things. I think what's more subtle and maybe even more rubs people the wrong way is this idea of bringing useful into game development, into the actual game experience. People are hiring your game to do something for them. You can see this in segmentation. You can see this in the motivations work, right? I am using this game. I just use Forza as an example. Plenty of people use Forza to race around the track, but they're basically using it as a chat room, right? I want to hang out with my friends. Racing together is kind of an easy thing. Nobody's shooting at us or blowing us up. So they are hiring that game to just kind of be a chat room for them, right? So in that case, if somebody's hiring your game for social, those social features better be fantastic. And to be honest, maybe even at the trade-off between gameplay or graphics or something like that, right? If you're hiring a phone game to help you, kill a few minutes, or just something you can pick up and put down, well, then your save states and your checkpoints and really understanding that 5 to 10 minute experience is paramount, because they are hiring your game to help them when they're on the bus or help them when they're online at the bank. And so the lesson for me here is not only to tie the platform experiences to useful, but to really drive useful into game design, even at first glance, if you don't think it's going to help your product development. I can pretty much guarantee it will. All right, so the third lesson, this is my favorite. It was the toughest to learn. It kind of took me the longest to learn. It was also the most painful. So this I'm calling what not to do, right? So, and it's also kind of the closest I'll come to airing dirty laundry, because like I said, I absolutely loved working with that team, but this part was definitely something that we could have done better. So one reason the Kin was such a public failure, such a great story, such just a really big disaster, was not just because of the kind of the product success. We actually at Microsoft acquired Danger, who were the folks who were making Sidekick at the time, and then pretty much turned that into the Kin. So Sidekick was this really popular, trendy, kind of youthful version of a smartphone. You can see a celebrity Paris Hilton here holding it. I don't know if she's still a celebrity. I haven't checked in, but she was an example of just any picture of a celebrity would be holding a Sidekick. They really took that approach, and it was all about social, and it was all about quick sharing, and had the flip out screen. It was really great. So at the time it was like, oh great, Microsoft is going to buy that. We're going to take over that brand. It's going to be great because that's exactly what we want. But really from day one, and I mean day one, I mean I showed up around 2007 on a job interview at the beautiful Pioneer Studios, which you can see a picture of on the right-hand side there. And right off the bat, the team that were interviewing me were saying, yes, we are going to make this new, innovative, awesome thing. We are going to be different. We're not going to do what the Sidekick did. We're not going to talk to the guys from Danger. We're building this studio and this group and this design culture, and we're going to go forward, and we are going to make this thing awesome. And it sounded great, but in the back of my mind, of course, there was this red flag of like, well, okay, that all sounds great, but this thing is popular and successful. Why are we trying to break from that? So that for sure raised red flags. But back then, I mean, I'd love to say that I had this maturity, but this is really how I felt kind of around 2007. I wasn't a noob by any stretch, but I didn't have that sort of conviction or even the experience or the knowledge to say like, okay, I get it, but we really should also go learn from them. We really should go double down on understanding the good and bad, even if we want to go in a totally different direction, right? And I actually was bought in. I love the culture. I love the idea. I love the product space. I am still in love with the design leads that I worked with. I want them to adopt me. And so I would, I'd go back and work with any of those guys in a minute. But this particular part of it, I wish I had a little more conviction or a little more experience. I also had to throw this picture up because this was my neighbor who was cutting my hair for free in his basement. I would kill to have a neighbor that could cut hair right now instead of my wife and her clippers that we just bought 2 weeks ago. So this is a nice nostalgic piece for me. So at the time, it wasn't just Danger and Sidekick. We had an entire group of people working on Windows Phone 7, which again, I absolutely love from an interface point of view. But in the Kin Studio, we were trying not to talk to those folks. We wanted to ship something on Windows Phone 7 platform that didn't look or feel or sound like a Windows Phone. And as a researcher, again, I love collaborating. I love reaching out to other folks. But I was bought in. I was like, no, we're going to go do this on our own and make something awesome and different. And then at a broader Microsoft level, this org chart cartoon came out, years ago, and we can laugh at it now, but it really was accurate. There was this notion of, in Windows, we make stuff and we get credit for it and screw everybody else. And the same thing in phone, the same thing in Xbox at the time. It was this guns out. Now, I can show this because this is not the case. The Satya vision and vibe around One Microsoft really is ringing true, and I absolutely love working there right now. But at the time, this was part of it. It was both kind of at a local level of us trying to be new and innovative, and it was a Microsoft level where you didn't get credit for helping out the org next to you. So the lesson for us here is really be careful of any kind of culture or anything like that that starts with what not to do. So from a game perspective, I have I kind of made up these quotes, but I'm sure I've heard them many, many times in my career. You're sitting in a game pitch or you're talking in a design meeting and the team is saying these really great, fantastic forward-looking statements about being innovative, about building new, cool experiences. But there's an undercurrent of won't or can't or don't, right? Well, we don't want to be like any other game, so we're going to do this. That's not user focused, right? That's not putting users at the core of the experience. That's starting with what not to do. And again, it's usually not super explicit. It's just a factor of the market or a factor of what we can build, right? So, oh, we know fans are going to love this, but we can't actually do it, so we have to go off and do something like this. Or, well, we know what people don't want. They don't want more of that thing, so we're going to go give this thing. So what I would say here is be very clear, especially in the user research field and the UX field, of pushing on your teams to go toward the user, to be user focused, to talk about what we do want to do, and to just be careful, just watch out for those red flags when people are saying what not to do, what we shouldn't do, and what we can't do. Okay, great. Like I said, I wanted to try to keep it around 20 minutes so we have a few minutes for questions. These are the 3 lessons, right? Just watch out for chasing those rabbits, going for too many audiences and not landing with the one you really want. Please, even if you're bristling at it right now, please take a second and think about usefulness in your games. I know it's a weird concept, but I think it's going to help. And then just watch out for those cultures or those ideas or those pitches that talk more about what not to do than really what you should do. And then I'm going to end on a thank you, of course, a big thanks to John Hobson and everybody else involved today. This is absolutely fantastic. I'm so glad you guys put this together. I am going to put a Medium article out on this with Kim, probably another week or two whenever I can get to it. So this talk was 3 lessons. There's actually 6 lessons in the article, so it's kind of like DLC for anybody who was in this talk. And then, of course, we do have the Game Summit next year. It's very sad that we couldn't have it this year, so please come and attend that. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now I'm going to flip over. I think I will stop sharing my screen. And then I think I will try to figure out how chat works on this. So I got the screen shared. And please, somebody wants to jump in with questions because I'm not seeing. Hold on. I'm going to pull up chat. Okay, great. Now I'm looking at chat. Thank you. So I'm not seeing any questions in the open questions. There's no way that I have answered everything so brilliantly. Oh, okay. If you could jump in time, what was the one thing you would tell yourself? Oh, yeah, back to 2007. Absolutely. I mean, that was hopefully the goal of this talk, right? Is like, these are the lessons that I would go back and tell myself. For sure that I would say that, especially that one around what not to do, I would have figured out a way to have more confidence and sort of frame my learning from those other groups in a more productive way that didn't feel like I was just trying to be a user researcher to tell everybody to do the same way. So I think if I could go back, I would have told myself that it is my job to do that. It is not my job to do what I'm told and align with the vision 100%. It is my job to figure out the user research best practice around bringing in learnings. But whew, confidence is tough sometimes. So I bet if I went back and told myself that, it might not have helped, but maybe. Thank you for the question. That's great. How do you separate the rabbits in chasing two rabbits? I think in our case, if we had approached it that these were two different audiences instead of just a continuum that you could hit the middle for, I think that actually would have helped us. So I don't think it was a matter of picking one or the other, but we really thought like, oh, if you just reduce costs by a few bucks and you improve features by a few, then there's this whole audience in the middle. And when we landed with that data plan, it was pretty clear that that was not the case. It wasn't a continuum. It was sort of a nice breaking point that we hadn't thought about. Excuse me. But another great question too. Questioning the product vision. How would you approach that? Yeah, exactly. That is very difficult. Thank you. It's not, I absolutely believe that user research should be questioning the product vision. I believe we should be help validate it. We should help inform it. If we can get in early enough, we should definitely work on the product vision. So I totally believe that's a space for UR and UX. But we have to use our skills, our sort of empathy to make sure that we're helping the team with the product vision, not coming out and say, this is terrible, this is bad, but helping them understand it and bringing user feedback into that process, right? So in this case, we actually love the vision, but I would have brought a lot more focus into that idea of a data plan. And there was a few other sort of useful things that we didn't quite land with people. And frankly, I probably would not have approached it as questioning the product vision. I would have probably figured out, or I have plenty of experience now where we're working with the teams to understand those components and trying to fix them. But it's very difficult to walk into somebody's office and say, I think the product vision of this is wrong. Because frankly, they have a tough job. It is not an easy thing to figure out what that vision should be. Can I please share the Medium article? Of course, I love credit and publicity, so I share everything everywhere. That's why I pitched at the end of this deck. So these are great. Those are the questions from there. I'm just going to look in chat real quick. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of language about validating, but where do the ideas come from? Yeah, it was a really fantastic partnership with planning and marketing and user research, and in fact, and design. And I basically just say the whole team besides user research was creating this vision. They were looking at the market, and they have a very, very difficult job. It is not a UR's job to size a market and figure out cost and do all of that stuff, and it's not easy. So I'm always a little hesitant to tell those people they're not doing a good job because it's very difficult. But they did. The folks on the team by the time I got there and then ongoing around planning and marketing and design came up with these great ideas of where we could land this feature. But for timing reasons and some of the reasons I talked about, yeah, it just was not a success. Okay, and then probably the last question based on time, how do formal process to step away from everything? Oh, so how did I come up with these insights? So I really have spent years talking about the lessons learned here. I love trying to bring in stories from other groups I've worked on in gaming. I cannot say that I have a formal process except thinking about people I've mentored or hired or my managers and just taking the stories that I find myself talking about quite a bit and then writing them down and then looking for interesting ways to share them like today. So thank you very much. I'm looking at the time. I think that's it and really appreciate it. I took off my Twitter handle, but it's just at Tom Lorusso and I'm basically everywhere all the time. So please come find me and ask questions. Thanks again.